There's a lot that we don't talk about, sometimes due to embarrassment, fear, insecurities. We neglect discussions about the most common parts of our lives, things we all deal with, sometimes every day. But on the Caffeinated Gypsy podcast, together, we'll break all of those taboos and talk open and honest about shared experiences. Knowledgeable people relating things you felt but never put into words. Parenting, sex, fitness, energy, anything to connect you to your authentic self, unfiltered. Now, the Caffeinated Gypsy herself, a free spirit, world traveler with a passion for fitness and exploring topics that others might avoid. Hello and welcome to the Caffeinated Gypsy podcast. I'm Stephanie Cotton, your host. Thank you all so much for being with me today. On this episode, we're going to finish up the throat chakra. So we're doing week 4 of the throat chakra from my book, Light It Up. And if you are new to the podcast, you're more than welcome to join in. You can still do all the exercises, but if you are a little bit lost, definitely go back to some of my earlier podcasts where I talk about the root chakra, or even just looking at the beginning of the throat chakra series. But you can definitely listen today, and if you want to jump right in, jump right in. Let's do some updates first. Lots of stuff always going on. I told you guys fall is my busy time. So right now I have an event going on in Raleigh, North Carolina, and this is going to be on Friday, September 27th at Bar Up Yoga Studio, and I'm going to be doing an introductory to astrology, and the ladies over at Bar Up, Leah and Winter, are going to be doing some zodiac poses to go with that. So it should be a lot of fun. If you are in the local area or close enough to the local area that you want to do that, please feel free to head over to my Instagram, and I will have a link to that in my link tree. Also, you can go over to Bar Up on their website or on their Instagram account, and there is a link to sign up for that. You do need to sign up for that. We probably won't have enough room to do walk-ins, so definitely sign up for that, but it's going to be a ton of fun. I'm really excited. You guys know I've been like in hermit status. I haven't actually done any events outside of my home in several months, so I'm really excited to do that. And I'd love to have as many of you as possible. So come hang out with me, talk about astro, do a little bit of gentle yoga. I'm planning on bringing some coffee samples, and I'm thinking maybe of doing like a Lizzo charged coffee. You feel me? So you're definitely not going to want to miss that. Coffee is out. Get your coffee, guys. Every day I'm like, oh, I'm going to do this kind of coffee. Oh, I'm going to do this. I have tons of ideas. The only thing holding me back right now is my time constraints, because I have to create a label when I do these. And I do all the graphic design myself, so it's time consuming, and then I have to send off to the printer and all that stuff. So if it was up to me in my brain, we would have like 20 lines of coffee already, but logistically, it just doesn't seem to be happening. So I just sent off for the ritual labels, so those will be coming out very soon, and that's going to be a coffee that you will use like for rituals. So for full moon, new moon, if you're doing meditation, if you are into doing like any type of magic or things like that, this is going to be like the coffee for that. It's going to be super duper charged. And then the house blend is always available, and that's always, all of my coffees are always crystal charged, sound charged. I'm playing around with doing some different types of sound charges, so we're always going to have the Tibetan singing bowl as like a base, but I'm working on using some different types like Lizzo. I'm working on a Logic coffee, so it's going to be a lot of fun, and I think I can attest to the difference just when you're charging with different types of like music, because they all have their own vibration, and also too I'm pairing those up with crystals, so it's so much fun, you guys. Like every day I'm like the luckiest girl ever. This is so much fun. And my husband was super sweet, and he turned we have like an attic space that's finished, and it's literally just been sitting with boxes since we moved in. And he was really, really sweet and came up here and organized everything and created an office for me. So now I come up to my little attic space, and I'll have to take pictures for you guys. And this is where I do all of my coffee stuff. So obviously I don't roast in my attic because that would catch the house on fire, but this is where I package everything so it smells like a freaking coffee shop in my attic. Yeah, it's pretty magical. I have to tell you guys a story really quick, and then I'll shut up about coffee. But I was doing the Magic and Spice blend, which is my version of pumpkin spice, the other day, and I had to go to my son's school for a conference, and I was like rushing to try to like get everything ground, because anytime you get a coffee from me, if it's any type of flavoring, I have to grind it. So I was like grinding it, and there's all these different spices in it, like cinnamon and clove, and it was like getting really hot. And so I was like, man, I feel hot. And I rushed out of the house, and I got in the car, and I was like, man, I smell strong. Like I smell like coffee. And then my face started getting really, really red. And I walked into the conference, and I know they were like, what is wrong with this lady? She smells like cinnamon and like coffee, which I'm sure isn't like the worst thing ever, but I'm sure they were like, what is this lady doing? And what had happened is there's so much like dust in the air, is the cinnamon and clove particles. I think it's like the oil from it had gotten into my skin. So no lie, my face was like red all day. And I was like, I could not get rid of like the cinnamon smell. I keep telling my husband, like, when I die and they cremate me, they're going to smell coffee. Like, my ashes are going to smell like coffee. Coffee problems, y'all. So, now you know what kind of drama I have in my life. So, coffee's all available. You can head over to Caffeinated Gypsy and purchase that. And past life regression, holy moly. I've been doing a lot of these lately, and it's intense. As I mentioned in my last podcast, this portal from the underworld or the spirit realm or whatever you want to like fucking call it, we call it a veil. And so basically it's like, if you imagine, I don't know, there's a wall that separates us from that. Well, that wall gets almost like transparent, right? Like in the movies where you can like stick your hand through, or like, you know, I like my Harry Potter references where Harry Potter like just goes through the brick wall in the train station. It's like that, like it's very transparent. So, during this time of year, that veil lifts, and so it's easier to communicate. It's easier to have interaction. So it's very, very like busy right now. So it's a good time to do past life regression because you'll get a lot of insight. Your third eye is very open to this energy right now. And also too, your guides are working with you. Your ancestors are working with you to like help give you this information. So it's been, I've never done one and been like, oh yeah, just another past life regression. It's always like blows my mind every time. But right now, especially, it's been very interesting. And I always think it's super cool when these things start to shift and you can see it astrologically, like, oh, okay, we're moving into this energy. And then people start coming out like, I just feel like I need to do this right now. I always think that's really cool when people honor that intuition that they have. But also, too, I love to just like watch the cosmos at play and be like, oh, that's the cosmos, like kind of nudging you like now's the right time. So it's pretty cool. So if you want to do that, feel free to reach out to me at caffeinatedgypsy.com and we can do it whenever you like. And I think that's it, guys. Let's talk about throat chakra. Yep. Talking about the throat chakra today. So we're on week 4 from my book, Light It Up. If you are not familiar with that, you can go on my website at caffeinatedgypsy.com. I have a digital version of this, and then I also have a print version. So if you want to do the print version, if you go on my website, it actually says like Caffeinated Gypsy's book, Light It Up. You need to click on that link because that takes you to my printer. I print through a third party, and so they'll take you directly to their website and you can get it printed and mailed to you. If you want to do digital, you can just go to my products page and you can purchase it and download it right then. You can send it off to your own printer, however you want to do that. So we're on the 4th week of that, throat chakra. So if you remember, the throat chakra is really what gives us our voice. It's what allows us to be heard, to be seen in the world. So when we have blockages in this, it's really about blockage of our self-expression. It's a blockage in us really realizing who we are. So when we're working on with the throat chakra is really to open the space up, but also to have it balanced, because we don't want it like overactive, because we can have something be overactive. If it's overactive, I tend to think of this as people that are just really loud. They talk excessively. Those people that just like talk and you're like, what are you even trying to say right now? That's a really overactive throat chakra. And then an underactive throat chakra is going to be somebody who like they don't speak up for themselves, or when they do, it's always like that very timid, meek voice, and you're like, okay, like, what are you trying to say still? And this is something I work with a lot with my girls. I have one of my daughters is a Pisces, and she's very like meek in her voice. She has a very quiet voice, and so I'm constantly like, hey, like, speak up, let your voice be heard, make sure that people hear you when you talk, because I feel like that's so important to instill in each, like everybody, but especially children. And then with my other daughter, she talks a lot, but she has a really hard time getting out what she really wants people to hear. So she gets really frustrated and flustered. So it's about like, I'm slowing her down. I'm telling her to use her voice very purposefully. And so that's a lot of what the throat chakra is training yourself how to really use your voice, how to be heard. And that's something personally that I had to work on a lot. I speak very fast, and that is part of a throat chakra issue. I was very afraid for a long time for my voice to be heard, because as a child, a lot of times I felt like my voice wasn't heard no matter what I said. And, you know, times when I did express myself, it was shot down, or I was told, you don't say that, you don't do that, we don't want to hear that. So as an adult, I've had to really work on exercising my throat chakra and finding positive ways to do that. Not necessarily yelling or being combative. Because for me personally, a long time it was, don't say anything. And then like, boom, everything came out. And I didn't even know how to communicate without yelling. Like, I didn't know how to have a conversation with like my husband if I was upset in a way that was like calm, because I never learned that. So part of the throat chakra work for me was learning, how do I communicate and tell somebody I'm hurt or I'm upset, and keep calm and be confident in that and not be angry. So when you're working on that throat chakra, we're working on how do we use our voice in a way where we're being heard. And sometimes that does include anger. Anger is a very healthy emotion when we use it properly. So I don't ever want to be like, oh, don't be angry, because I feel like anger is extremely important. All of our emotions are important. It's learning how to work with them in a balanced way. So on that note, the physical activity for this week is to scream it out. The throat chakra gets closed and it gets stuck. If you've ever just had that lump in your throat, that's a closed throat chakra. And we can go back and forth. Like, we can have it open and then it can be closed. One of the things that I used to notice for myself was when I would get really upset, and I was, especially if I was like really hurt or I felt like I'd been mistreated, I would literally feel all this stuff like start in my throat, and I couldn't even speak. And my husband used to get so frustrated with me, because he would just be like, would you just talk to me? Just talk to me. And I would be like, I can't even get it out. And then when I would actually speak, it just wouldn't even make sense. And that is very typical of a very closed off throat chakra. So I started working on opening my throat, and one of the best tools I found was screaming. And not necessarily screaming at somebody, but to actually just get out somewhere and get it out, like get it unstuck. So what we're doing when we do that is we're letting all of that energy out, because what happens is all that stuff gets in there and it's stuck, like it can't move. So vibrationally, screaming unsticks stuff. That's why babies have like really healthy throat chakras when they're first born, because they're able to just get it all out. All of their emotions come out. And then as we get, a little bit older, we're taught not to do that. We're taught not to cry. We're taught not to yell. And obviously, there's a balanced way to do this, but screaming itself is a really good way. Now, I'm not saying to go scream at somebody. I'm saying to go scream. So go out into the woods, wait till everybody's out of your house, go scream into a pillow, but scream. I mean, get it out. And there's times I do this and I literally like scream and I cry, and then sometimes I like say things, all those things where we're just purging all of the stuff we've been holding in this area. So that's your assignment for this week. Go scream it out and then write about it. Like, how did you feel? What emotions came up? Maybe you felt like you needed to actually scream words. Maybe you just needed to like scream. Maybe that screaming turned into crying. For me personally, most of the time it turns into crying. How did you feel after you did that? I guarantee you, you're going to feel amazing. It's like having a really good cry or a really vigorous workout. It's a release of that energy that's been pent up. Now, when you do this, don't be surprised if you don't start to like, have stuff come up. Because anytime we release, it opens space for stuff to come up. Allow that stuff to come up. Journal about it. You may start to realize like, hey, I've really been holding myself back. I've been like hindering my voice. I'm not allowing myself to be heard. The other thing that we're going to do this week is I want you to write, this is your journal assignment. What's holding you back? Like, what's holding your voice back? If you have a strong voice, like maybe you're the type of person that you communicate and people are intimidated by you. Or maybe when you communicate, it's almost comes across as aggressive. So think about that and write about, well, why do I come across that way? Like, am I trying to convey something? Maybe you don't feel like you're really being heard, so you feel like you maybe need to be a little more aggressive. Or maybe the opposite. Maybe you feel like you're speaking and nobody's ever listening to you. I know for me personally, that's been my problem, is I feel like I talk and nobody listens. And that's part of, my throat chakra and my own, trauma, is feeling like nobody was ever hearing me or listening. And that carries over into every other aspect of your life. For a really long time in my life, I always felt like people just didn't like see me. And so like I'm that person, people would meet me and then they would meet me, like they would just reintroduce themselves to me every time they met me. I mean, I worked with people for years and they would like continue to reintroduce themselves to me. And so when I started working on my chakras, I was like, what the fuck, dude? Like, why am I so invisible to people? And, especially like in my job, I was like, I'm really good at my job. Like, the people that work closest with me know me, but like, why do people do this? Why do acquaintances continually do this? And I started to realize that like part of that was me kind of shrinking myself back. I'm not a very loud person in general. I almost like would I have like rounded shoulders. I would kind of cave myself in because I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want to be heard. And then when people didn't remember me, I would be like, why doesn't anybody ever remember me? Why am I not being seen? Because I didn't want to be seen. And so think about that. Like if you're not being heard or you feel like you just are talking to the wall, is it because maybe you don't really want to be heard and you're not exerting yourself in a way that people are taking you seriously? So just think about that as you're working on this, like what's really holding you back? And if maybe you're like, maybe you're scared to speak up. Like there's still lots of moments in my life where I'm like, oh God, I don't want to do this. And it took me a really long time to get comfortable with that. I still hate confrontation. Like I will avoid it like the plague. But now I'm at a point where I'm like, okay, I've got to do this. Even if this is uncomfortable, like I'm going to do it. So think about that. Like, what is it though? And like, I go back and I'm like, what am I really worried about? Oh, this person's not going to like me. Why am I worried about what this person thinks of me? I don't even know if I want that person to like me, but it takes me back to, those core years in my childhood development where I needed people and I didn't have people. So I turned myself into a caretaker. And so I'm always looking sort of for this like approval from people. And so I've had to really retrain that. And that's a big part of your throat chakra, is learning to be like, no, my voice is important. It's okay for me to speak my truth. It's okay for me to have an opinion. It's okay to be heard. And it's also okay if everybody else doesn't like it or agree with it. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. The right people will still be there, and everybody else can go along, and vice versa. There may be other people out there speaking their truth and you don't like it, and that's totally fine. It's learning to just be okay with that. And I think that's something that we have a real breakdown in our society with, is people get really upset if they don't like people's opinions. Or when people voice they're using their throat chakra, they're doing it in a way that like attacks people. And so it's about learning, how do we use our voice and going, it's okay if you don't like my opinion. It's okay if you don't like my message. And also learning how to voice those things with love and just saying, hey, like, this is who I am, and that's okay if you like it. It's okay if you don't. So I think like as a society as a whole, we're really all having to kind of work on this. And especially you see this all the time in like social media. People are terrible on social media. It blows my mind how nasty people can be on social media and how they'll like attack people. And the thing is, it really just shows you how much trauma people have and how wounded people really are with their throat chakra, because we're all just trying to kind of get through our day, right? And unless it's like a gross misconduct or somebody's physically being hurt, I think we all kind of have to just stay in our own lane and understand that we're all going to have our own opinions and our own ideas. And, it's not healthy for our throat chakra to attack people or be nasty. And it's really hard when you're trying to learn how to exercise your throat chakra and then you're on social media. And you see like people attacking other people, or maybe they're attacking you, and people are just posting like really mean things. That's really hard to feel confident in your voice or putting yourself out there into the world. So I always caution people, like, as you're working through your throat chakra, especially if you're an entrepreneur and you have to be on social media, give yourself some grace, like give yourself a break from social media. It takes a very strong throat chakra to work on social media. It takes very thick skin to do that. So be very kind to yourself. Give yourself those breaks as you're learning how to exercise your throat chakra, so that when you are doing it, you're feeling confident and secure in yourself. So that's the throat chakra, you guys. Continue to work on this. I think it's something, as I've mentioned, as a society, we need to continue to find healthy ways to work on this chakra. As I've mentioned in the past podcast, as women specifically, we're really trying to find our space, I think, in the world. And it's messy right now. I can see it on both ends of the spectrum. For so long, like, we weren't heard. And it's even worse for people that are minorities. We're all just trying to find our place and our voice in the world. And I think, sometimes it goes to the complete extreme, and we're almost like shouting it and yelling, and like we want to be heard. It reminds me of like a child when they're upset and they're throwing a temper tantrum. There's a lot of that going on right now because they're still learning how to find their voice. They're still learning how, hey, you can communicate and tell me you're upset without yelling at me. And like I mentioned, it took me years to learn that. And so as a society, I think we're learning how to do that right now. We're learning how to say, hey, that's not okay. And we can do this in a way where we're not insulting people. We're not being hateful. We can just say, I don't agree with you. And also finding that space to say, I don't agree with you, and I don't have to be a part of this. And I'm just going to walk away from that. So we definitely have our work cut out for us, but I think we're definitely moving in the right direction. So all right, you guys, I think that's it for today. As always, if you want to come hang out with me on a regular basis, you are always welcome to join my Patreon. The Caffeinated Gypsy Tribe would love to have you, and you can do that on my website, or you can go to Patreon. I post on the group daily. There's also some really cool benefits. There's different levels. One of the higher levels, you get to work with me every month. So if you want to be a part of that, I would love to have you. We have an awesome group right now. Otherwise, you guys have an amazing day, and until the next one.